What happens when one of Hollywood's biggest stars sits down for what is supposed to be a simple morning interview, only to be hit with questions that cross every possible boundary? Mark Wahlberg walked off the Today Show set, and what pushed him to that breaking point is more shocking than you might expect. Before we break down exactly what was said that caused a seasoned actor and producer to lose his cool on live television, make sure you hit that subscribe button and leave a comment below telling me whether you think celebrities are ever justified in walking out of interviews, or if they should just tough it out no matter what. The morning began like any other day on the Today Show. Mark Wahlberg was booked for a routine promotional appearance, the kind he had done countless times throughout his career. The segment was meant to focus on his latest movie, a gritty dramatic thriller that had him stepping into a role very different from what audiences were used to seeing. The producers had assured his team that the conversation would be clean and professional, no controversial angles, no surprise questions, nothing beyond what had already been agreed upon. Mark arrived on set relaxed and confident, greeting staff members, exchanging handshakes, and taking his seat across from the host. The interviewer was Sarah Mitchell, a longtime television journalist known for her smooth delivery and calm, polished on-screen presence. As the cameras went live, she smiled warmly and opened the segment. "Good morning, Mark. Thank you so much for joining us today." "Good morning. Glad to be here," Mark replied, settling comfortably into his chair. "So let's talk about this new film," Sarah continued. "You're playing a character that really pulls you into some dark emotional places. What made you want to take on this role?" Mark leaned forward slightly, fingers interlaced. "I've been doing this for over 30 years now, and at this stage in my career I'm looking for roles that challenge me, roles that scare me a little in a good way." This character is dealing with grief, guilt, and the search for redemption when he feels unworthy of it. "Those kinds of themes mean a lot to me right now." Sarah nodded and glanced briefly at her notes. "The early reviews have been extremely positive. Some critics are calling this one of your strongest performances. How does that land with you?" "It's always nice to hear," Mark said with a small, humble smile. "But honestly, I don't make movies for critics. I make them for audiences. For people who want to feel something or think about something when they walk out of the theater. If critics respond well too, that's great, but it's not the main goal." For the next couple of minutes, everything flowed smoothly. They talked about filming challenges, Mark's preparation for the role, and his thoughts on where modern cinema was headed. The exchange was calm, professional, and exactly what had been promised. Then Sarah shifted slightly in her seat, and there was a noticeable change in her tone. It was subtle, but Mark felt it immediately. "Mark, I want to change direction for a moment, if that's okay," Sarah said, her smile still in place, though her eyes looked more serious. "You've had an incredible career, but it hasn't been without controversy. Many viewers remember incidents from your younger years. Do you think about those moments often? Do they still weigh on you?" Mark's face tightened just a bit, but he kept his composure. "I've spoken about that many times over the years. I made serious mistakes when I was young, mistakes I regret deeply. I've spent a long time trying to grow, to make things right where I could, and to become a better person. I can't undo the past, but I can choose how I live now and how I move forward." "Of course," Sarah replied, nodding as if fully understanding. "But some people feel that you were given opportunities to move on in ways others might not have been. They say privilege played a role. How do you respond to that?" Mark took a measured breath. "Everyone's journey is different. I don't excuse what I did, and I don't downplay it. I faced consequences, and I put in real work to change. If people still want to criticize me, that's their right. But I'm not going to apologize for trying to improve or for the effort I've made to be accountable." Sarah leaned back slightly, tapping her pen. "You're very open about your Catholic faith. At the same time, you've played characters who are violent, use harsh language, or live lives that seem at odds with church teachings. How do you reconcile that? Isn't there some hypocrisy there? Mark's jaw tightened. That's a very simplified way of looking at it. I'm an actor. I tell stories about flawed human beings. Those stories aren't always pretty or clean. My faith is personal. It guides how I live, how I treat others, how I raise my children. But it doesn't mean I can only portray perfect people on screen. That's not realistic, and it's not how storytelling works. But don't you think you have a responsibility, Sarah pressed, especially to young fans who look up to you? When you appear in films with graphic violence or criminal behavior, aren't you normalizing those things? Mark shook his head, irritation creeping into his voice. I don't agree with that at all. Audiences are capable of understanding the difference between fiction and reality. I've played all kinds of roles. None of them define who I am. And honestly, this is starting to feel less like a conversation about my movie and more like I'm being put on trial. Sarah smiled again, though it felt forced. I'm just asking questions that many people are curious about. You're a public figure. That comes with scrutiny. There's scrutiny, and then there's an agenda, Mark replied firmly. And right now, this feels like the second one. We agreed this would be about the film. That's why I'm here. Well, your life and your work are connected, aren't they? Sarah said calmly. A lot of people believe you can't separate the artist from the art. Mark held her gaze. I actually think you can, and often you should. But clearly we didn't come into this with the same expectations. Ignoring the tension, Sarah moved on. Let's talk about your business ventures. You've built a successful restaurant brand, a production company, a fitness business. Some critics say you're spread too thin and more focused on building an empire than on acting. Is there any truth to that? Mark laughed briefly in disbelief. So now it's a problem that I work hard in different areas? I create jobs. I support families. I invest in communities. Somehow that's supposed to be a negative? I'm not framing it as negative, Sarah replied smoothly. I'm presenting viewpoints that exist and giving you space to respond. No, Mark shot back. You're taking every part of my life and twisting it into something questionable. My past, my faith, my career, my businesses. Everything is being framed as an issue. That's not journalism. That's a hit job. Sarah's smile faltered for a moment. These are valid questions, Mark. You've been in the public eye a long time. Valid questions about the film, yes, Mark said, his voice rising before he steadied it. But you haven't asked anything meaningful about the project I came here to talk about. You're trying to tear me down. That's not my goal, Sarah insisted. Let me ask this then. In your new film, your character struggles with family trauma. You're a father of 4. How do you protect your children from the darker side of Hollywood, especially with all the scandals involving kids in the industry? Mark paused. Of course I'm concerned, like any parent would be. But my children are not part of this interview. And the way you just shifted from criticizing me to bringing up my kids crosses a line. If you're uncomfortable, we can move on, Sarah said. Then let's move back to the film, Mark replied. The reason I'm here. Sarah glanced at her notes, seeming to consider it. Then she looked up. Before that, I need to ask about reports online claiming you've been difficult to work with on recent projects. Unnamed sources describe you as demanding and uncooperative. How do you respond? Mark's face went blank. Unnamed sources? So now I'm supposed to answer anonymous rumors? The reports are out there, Sarah said. Don't you think addressing them would help? No, Mark said firmly. They're nonsense. I wouldn't still be working with top people if they were true. Bringing gossip like this onto a morning show says a lot about where this interview has gone. Sarah's tone hardened. I'm giving you a chance to clear the air. There's nothing honest about this, Mark replied. You ambushed me, dragged my family into it, and now you're quoting faceless accusations. This is about creating a viral moment. You seem very defensive, Sarah observed. Or I'm being disrespected on live TV, Mark shot back. I've answered tough questions my entire career. This isn't that. I'm doing my job, Sarah said. And you're doing it badly, Mark replied calmly. What's your end goal here? I'm trying to show the full picture, Sarah said. Not just the image you promote. At that, Mark stood up. The studio fell silent. You don't get to question my faith or my family. You don't know me. I came here to talk about a film, and you turned it into a spectacle. Mark, please sit down, Sarah said nervously. No, Mark said, unclipping his microphone. I'm done. You're really walking out? Watch me, he replied, setting the mic down and looking briefly into the camera before leaving the set. Sarah turned back to viewers, trying to regain control as Mark disappeared backstage. Producers rushed around, stunned. A young staffer stopped him in the hallway, apologizing and insisting the interview wasn't supposed to go that way. Mark told her calmly but firmly that it had been a setup. Sarah followed him, asking to talk privately, saying the walkout made him look guilty. Mark corrected her. He wasn't guilty. He was drawing a boundary. As he finally exited the building, the noise faded. His phone buzzed non-stop. The fallout was coming, but as he stepped into the morning air, he felt relief. For once, he had said enough, and he didn't regret it.